I'm Sarah Kenzier, the author of the bestsellers The View from Flyover Country and Hiding in Plain Sight, and of the book They Knew, How a Culture of Conspiracy Keeps America Complacent.
I'm Andrea Chalupa, a journalist and filmmaker, and the writer and producer of the journalistic thriller Mr. Jones, about Stalin's genocide famine in Ukraine. The film the Kremlin doesn't want you to see, so be sure to watch it.
And this is Gaslit Nation, a podcast covering corruption in the United States and rising autocracy around the world.
The song you just heard was Nickel and Dime by Sofia Etchegaray. Raised in the wild by feral graduate students, Sofia has lived all over the country and the world, and as such, her musical influences cut a wide swath. They include flamenco, Renaissance music, Texas singer-songwriters, and of course, Tom Lehrer. Her accolades include semi-finalist awards from the Music to Life and New Song songwriting competitions. Sofia has been many things in life: a Harvard dropout, a software tester, a singer-songwriter, an essayist, and even a Muppet. Long story there. Since 2009, she has also been a professional patient as a serious bout of Lyme disease left her disabled. As her body has changed, she has found new ways to express her creativity, which she believes is the birthright of all human beings. Sofia's statement about her song is the following: "It all comes down to money. A funk song with a singable chorus that breaks down how usury works will, unfortunately, always be relevant when you're talking about politics in America. As for creating, it helps me stay alive." We'll post a link to Nickel and Dime on our Twitter page and in the show notes for this episode on our Patreon page. You can find more of Sofia's music on SoundCloud. Exciting announcement. Sarah and I have the first ever Gaslit Nation book coming out this June 13 to be exact is the big date. We worked on this book. Oh, that's like, there could be a book about us working on this book. It's called Dictatorship. It's Easier Than You Think. And it's a wild ride graphic novel where you go on this journey learning about the perks and the pitfalls of becoming a dictator. And there's this handsome Cary Grant narrator who takes you along for this bizarre fever dream. And at the end of the book, there's a big reveal on who he is. It is illustrated by an extraordinary feminist politician, human rights activist out of Poland named Kasia Babis. And she just nailed the spirit of us, the spirit of the show, of our really dumb yet hilarious jokes that permeate this book. And we go after everybody. So we look forward to sharing that with you. If you want to join us in the rollout, the launch of Dictatorship, It's Easier Than You Think, and get access to the events we're going to do during this time of rolling out the book, make sure you're subscribed to Patreon. There, we're going to share the behind the scenes of the making and events and all sorts of fun stuff as we celebrate the first ever Gaslit Nation book. And you can order that now. We'll drop a link on where you can find the book and pre-order on the show notes for this week's episode.
Yes, and it is quite the ride. You know, one thing that's kind of sad and interesting is, Andrea and I began working on this book in 2019 because graphic novels take a while to get made, especially during a global pandemic. And now, of course, we are rolling out our book about dictatorship in the midst of increasingly entrenched right-wing dictatorship, at least on the state level. So we'll see if we too end up on the banned book lists.
We're going for it with this one.
Then we'll write a book about that, and it'll be called My Gulag Diaries: The Story of 2024. Anyway. So last week, if you're a regular listener of the show, you probably know I was not there. I was on a road trip across the country with my family. We drove out to the Southwest. I stood in the four corners of Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, and Utah, all of which is on Navajo territory, and thought about the incredible destructive idiocy of labeling any state as red or blue, ignoring, the history of the United States, the complexity of the United States, the diversity of the United States. This is something I always think about when I'm on these trips. Because when my family goes on a trip, we always drive and we leave from Missouri, which means that I have driven across the United States from the center, dozens of times in every direction, passing through every type of community possible. So I know that these stereotypes do not hold. So anyway, one thing I did not expect to happen was to be in Oklahoma City on the day that Trump was giving his fascist speech in Waco. I had planned to be in Oklahoma City on that day, just as a stopping point on the way home, and I had planned to visit the Oklahoma City bombing memorial, and share that with my family and teach my children about what happened there and why, and pay my respects to the victims and their family, and to the rescue workers. And it was unbelievably horrifying to be there on the same day that a seditious, violent, career criminal was giving his return to the campaign stage speech at Waco, at a place, where the FBI did slaughter innocents, at a place of tremendous tragedy, at a place where the FBI should be accountable. And then Trump, of course, trying to present himself, as the arbiter of justice, as someone who will bring about vengeance. And of course, Waco is one of the things that inspired Timothy McVeigh to commit his act of terrorism in Oklahoma City and bomb the federal building in 1995, killing 168 innocent people. And so there's so many levels of exploitation going on and so much emotion. And then, of course, on top of that, you have Merrick Garland, Merrick Garland, who falsely positions himself as somebody who played a role in catching McVeigh. He played no role in catching McVeigh. And he presents himself as the prosecutor of that case. He was not the prosecutor of that case. Joseph Hartzler was the prosecutor. All that Merrick Garland did was, while he was working in the Clinton DOJ, is he flew to Oklahoma City shortly after, did some photo ops, looked around, and then, other members of the DOJ and also, Oklahoma City officials took over that case. McVeigh, of course, was apprehended within 48 hours of committing the terrorist act. Unlike other seditious terrorists, he was actually held in prison immediately because people saw the urgency of the crisis and that he would strike again if given the opportunity. And he freely admitted this. He was unrepentant. He was proud of what he had done, and he was extraordinarily dangerous. And so, we've gone over this in prior shows about how the myth of Merrick Garland being involved heavily with Oklahoma City was created, how it was created by the woman who mentored him, Jamie Garelick, who was, Jared and Ivanka's lawyer, and who's also been involved in a number of basically of state crimes. She's a cover-up artist in the vein of Ray Cohn or Bill Barr or Alan Dershowitz, who was actually her mentor. They've created this mythology. So I was feeling just such a level of disgust. Like, obviously, the greatest disgust is with Trump and his exploitation of what happened at Waco, his attempt to get, violent right-wing militias to once again attack federal government institutions. They want, the fact that he wants to do it in his name when he is everything. He is the deep state that he rails against. He is the elite that he rails against. He has not ever been someone who has looked out for the interests of the American people. This is purely a career criminal who wants to get back into power, both to sate his backers, but also to protect himself permanently from any chance of prosecution. And I have to just add briefly, I'll get back to this later, the absurdity of leaving on a trip for about 10 days, during which I vowed to not check the news. And as I was leaving, I was hearing reports that Trump was going to be indicted very, very soon, that it was definite, that it was on the way, that it was going to be Monday or Tuesday. And I kind of rolled my eyes and thought, yeah, I'll believe it when I see it. And of course, by the end of that trip, he was giving a fascist rally in Waco, of course, free from all indictment. And we'll get back to that. But I just want to give a little more background about Oklahoma City and just describe what it was like to be there in general, not just on the day that Trump was given this speech. First of all, if you are in Oklahoma City, I highly recommend going to this memorial. It's one of the most emotionally moving and honestly emotionally wrenching and beautifully designed memorials I've ever seen. It's a pool, and at each end, they have the time of 9:01 before the attack etched into this kind of, this column, looking more like a bridge. And then on the other side of the pool is 9:03, and the attack took place in the middle. And so it forces you to think about that, about how many things can change in the blink of an eye, about how many lives can be lost so quickly. And then next to that are chairs. There are chairs to honor each of the victims of the attack. And, one of the things that really broke me when I was there was seeing, the smaller chairs that they had for children, children who were in the daycare in the building, to mark that had happened, that they were victims of this crime. And I was there, when the sun was starting to set, and the chairs were, lit up, and it felt like it was a very somber, it felt like a kind of holy moment. And I felt haunted by what happened, but I also felt a kind of relief that people were remembering, that this site exists, that people aren't forgetting, that these were real lives and real victims, because we live in this time with COVID, with all of these other tragedies, with this normalization of mass death, with this move on attitude about January 6th, and denial, continual denial about the threats that we face. In another part of the memorial, there was graffiti that was preserved from the original day of the attack, from April 19th, 1995, that a rescue worker wrote, where he says, "We search for the truth, we seek justice, the courts require it, the victims cry for it, and God demands it." And I just think how the spirit of that often feels like it is lost today, because we have lost so many battles over the last 8 years. But one of the greatest battles, I think, is that of our expectation for truth and for justice. People are they're I don't want to say they're giving in, because people are very exhausted and we've had to contend with a lot, but they're coming to rationalize a lot of atrocities that should never be accepted in any way. And one of the ways they do this is by rewriting history so that they can live in this fantasy world, so that they can pretend that somebody like Merrick Garland is actually on their side, instead of out there protecting Trump and the syndicate behind Trump. And they want to pretend that Trump can't win, or that he won't be as bad this time, or that somebody like DeSantis isn't just, posh Trump, and that the systemic problems that gave rise to Trump have somehow been taken care of simply because we have a Democrat as president. When obviously that's not the case. We'd have a Democrat as president, and we had a, Democratic Senate and House. And look where we are now. We're in a worse position objectively than we were 2 years ago, and part of that is just the continuation of the policies that the Trump administration created, and the Biden administration's refusal to counter them, to roll them back, and especially to pursue accountability. Because if you don't pursue accountability with a mafia syndicate backed by white supremacist militias, you're not going to be able to pass policy. You're not going to be able to create a future for this country, which anyone wants or desires. If all people want, I think, is the ability to live their lives in peace, with some sort of expectation of baseline justice, with the elimination of elite criminal impunity. Like, everyone is very fed up. And part of the reason they're fed up is because of these endless fantasies, whether it's the revenge fantasy peddled by Trump in Waco, when he actually symbolizes everything wrong with our system of government that he claims to rail against, or the fantasies of, that justice is coming, that QAnon peddles, and that the, Mueller, Comey, Bragg, Vance, Garland crowd peddles as well. But just a couple of details about Oklahoma City, because, once I started debunking these myths about Merrick Garland, which, by the way, I can't believe people believe this, because if you were just alive in 1995, even if you were young, like I was 16 when that attack happened, you know Merrick Garland wasn't involved in this, and you know he wasn't in the DOJ for most of the trial. These are things that are very easy to debunk, so it's wild to me that people believe them. But anyway, one of the predecessor events to the Oklahoma City bombing that interests me is the Fort Smith Sedition Trial of 1988. Obviously, folks bring up Waco, rightfully, as a motivator for McVeigh to carry out this act, and the date of the federal invasion of David Koresh's violent cult was the same. It was April 19th, 1993. So I'm not denying that was a predecessor. But the Fort Smith Sedition Trial is one of these cases that has just been buried in American collective memory, but is directly tied to Oklahoma City and to McVeigh. And so Fort Smith is a city in Arkansas. And in 1988, 14 white supremacists went on trial because they wanted to overthrow the United States government, and they were going to assassinate federal officials. And then notably, they were acquitted by an all-white jury after a very brief trial. And after this acquittal, the individuals involved went on to commit hate crimes, including, murdering Jewish people in a terrorist attack in, I believe it was 2014. There's a long list. Like, if you do not clamp down on these groups early, they will come back. But one of the people who actually was convicted for different crimes, for assassinating a Black Arkansas state trooper and also a white shop owner that he thought was Jewish, and that was the basis for his hate crime, is a man named Richard Snell. And Snell was in a white supremacist group called the Covenant, the Sword, and the Arm of the Lord. And so he was actually convicted and he was sentenced to death. And one of the things that he and his partners had been considering doing was blowing up the Alfred Murrah building, the same building that McVeigh ultimately blew up in Oklahoma City. And they had been thinking about this since the 1980s, especially 1983. And this is another thing that's interesting. The day that the government picked for Snell's eventual execution, his federal execution, was in fact April 1995, the same day that McVeigh carried out the terrorist attack. And there are, some claim that Snell knew about this in advance, that he knew of McVeigh's plans, and he certainly was enjoying seeing them before seeing the results of, his legacy before he was executed. And I'm giving you a lot of history quickly, and I encourage you, to look this up because it's a very complicated story, but it's worth discussing. One of the things I brought up before about McVeigh is that what Garland and others in the DOJ under Clinton did was try to present this as a lone gunman scenario, that it was just McVeigh and Terry Nichols, and they really played down the ties to white supremacists and other militant groups. I think it's in part because those groups often originated from Arkansas and were thriving when Bill Clinton was the governor of Arkansas. And often those groups claimed that they knew about other crimes being carried out in Arkansas. For example, drug smuggling at the Mena airport in southern Arkansas that was involved in Iran-Contra, again, when Clinton was governor. And I'm not claiming Clinton was involved in these crimes, but that, as governor, you would have an obligation to know about them and ostensibly to stop them. So they were kind of, they claimed, these terrorists claim, that they were using this as leverage. And, you cannot trust the word of a terrorist. So I would, take this with a grain of salt. There was another, member of this group named Jim Ellison. He was in a cohort with McVeigh later on. But notably, one of the things that I didn't know about is that he was in the, Covenant, Sword, and Arm of the Lord terrorist militia group as well. That group was the subject of an ATF siege in the city of Elijah, Missouri, where they had built a large compound. And the date of that siege by the government was April 19th. It was April 19th, 1985, 10 years to the date before McVeigh attacked the Murrah building in Oklahoma City. So you're seeing this date over and over again in some very well-known cases like Waco, but also, in this siege of the CSA by the government, which was warranted, and in the execution of Snell. And it's interesting to me because you put someone in like Merrick Garland as AG under Biden, who certainly would have known all this history or should know all this history, who's working for President Clinton, that of course would have known this history because he was governor at the time. Then you bring him back under Biden, and he's doing the same thing. This a lack of accountability combined with historical inaccuracy and amnesia, not wanting to dig deep into the roots of Trumpism, his supporters, whether it is, the white supremacist and militia groups in the U.S. Granted, they have touched on, to some degree, the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys, but not to the degree that's necessary, not the historical roots of it. And then, of course, they ignore the organized crime component completely. They ignore transnational organized crime. They ignore the multitude of illegal acts Trump committed in office. They ignored the Mueller report, which laid out a lot of those acts, including obstruction of justice. And so I'm always left with the question of, there are so many dangerous individuals utterly willing to take innocent American lives, utterly willing to destroy this country. And Biden knows it, and the DOJ knows it, and Garland knows it. And so it is the logical conclusion here is that they want this. They don't want the responsibility of doing it. They don't want to be blamed for it. Trump is happy to wear that mantle. He's happy to be that bulldozer. But they are letting it happen. And it has now been over 2 years since an attempted violent coup, since an attack on the Capitol. And as I've said many times, there's no precedent in world history for a violent coup to remain unpunished with the seditionists in office making laws, and then their leader running for president again, holding a rally at the site that has inspired right-wing militias and made them feel justified in their violence. Waco is what they point to, Waco and Ruby Ridge, to say, this is necessary. The federal government is a oppressive and violent force, and it needs to be shut down. And, the irony with me is, like, I actually agree that the FBI is a violent and oppressive force. And I agree that what they did at Waco was horrific, but who they are turning to for leadership, people like Trump, they are that state. If Trump actually wanted to help the American people, even this little band of would-be terrorists, he would have done so while in office for 4 years. He is a kleptocrat, he is a mafioso, he is a thief. On top of that, he is backed by extremely dangerous white supremacist forces who feel emboldened by the lack of action of Merrick Garland. And so, I've gone on for quite a while here. The point I want to leave you with, though, is, do not forget the human toll of that day of April 19th, 1995, because I fear we will see it, similar events again and again. And it doesn't take a lot to kill that many people. McVeigh was part of a network, but it just takes a truck and fertilizer. And most of all, it takes, a climate of inaction and inertia and people willing to look the other way because they don't want to confront their own complicity or their own prior institutional failures. And if we don't start doing that now, they don't start doing that now. If officials don't start doing that now, we are in a world of trouble.
Very well said. And I would like to point out that Sarah wrote me yesterday saying, I'm back from vacation. I'm going to lean on you in this episode. You come out with a bunch of stuff and I'll comment. So I got like a whole page of notes ready. Sarah instead just gave me a little mini vacation here at Gaslit Nation.
Yeah, really fun one. No, go ahead with your notes because from what I know, we're on the same page here.
I could have spent that time binge watching 1923, but no. All right. Well, yes, I guess you save it all up. You go away on vacation, you get inspiration, and then you just come out with it. And that was an essay, and that was a powerful one.
Yeah, I know it's a lot to take in.
But Sarah Kenzier's travel guide of Americana.
Yeah, it's like meanwhile I'm out, doing fun shit, but then in the back of my mind, this is all in the back of my mind. But seriously, folks should really research, these Oklahoma City predecessors, especially, as I said, the Fort Smith Sedition Trial. There still are articles publicly available about that, and it's part of that forgotten history. And also go back and look in the Gaslit Nation archives in our episodes about Oklahoma City, about Elohim City, which is one of the white militia compounds, and so on. But anyway, you get to the stuff that you've been working hard on.
Yeah, okay, all the stuff I sweated on, my blood, sweat, and tears while you were out
sightseeing and mourning, really.
Exactly. Taking your selfies of empire decay. All right, so this was the big thing that was going on when you were out. There was all this fanfare, this breathless excitement, thanks to Barnum Bailey himself, WWF wrestler extraordinaire, Trump, announcing that he was about to be arrested. And you had everyone, as always, following his cat laser pointer. And the coverage that dominated last week was Trump's about to be arrested. It's going to finally happen. And all eyes were on Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg and all of the fancy legal pundit folks. The fancy folks were saying, well, all the signs do point to an indictment that's imminent. The grand jury is meeting again with all these witnesses. And let's look at all these other cases. Georgia, the shoe in Georgia might drop, as well as DC's investigation, as well as Jack Smith. Everything is ramping up. Letters are going out, calls for testimony from Ivanka and Jared. It's happening finally, folks. And the whole sense was that, well, maybe the midterms that defied tradition, the historical trend, where the midterms are always a big old vote on the president's party, the party in power. And normally they swing towards the opposition. And this time that did not happen for a number of factors we talked about in the show. Of course, there was the shock and awe from the Republicans rolling back human rights when they overturned Roe v. Wade. And that's led to a massive assault on women's rights in the states, an assault on women's health care, basic care, and so on. And it's just this atrocious fascist march towards greater and greater extremism that's going to come not just for women, but for democracy generally. Women are one of those canary in the coal mine, along with non-white people, along with LGBTQ people, and other vulnerable groups, that once their rights are gone, it's going to come for everyone else. We saw that with the rise of Hitler and so on. It's just the good old-fashioned dictator's playbook. And so you really had this midterm election that electrified the base, that drove out the independents, as was perfectly summed up by one independent that I spoke to. I believe it was in Wisconsin, when I was joining with countless people across the country, bleary-eyed, tired, emotionally exhausted, a million other things we needed or wanted to be doing, but still making these phone calls to get out the vote. And one independent said to me, I studied Germany, I studied the Third Reich. This is the first election in decades I'm voting in. That summed it up. It was the first big federal election since Donald Trump and his big like cult tried to violently overthrow our election on January 6th. And all of the coup plotters are still walking around free, doing podcasts, inciting another violent coup over in Brazil, and so on. So all of that is to say that with that big shellacking the Republicans took in the midterms, showing loud and clear that the Trump brand is toxic, all of the election deniers lost the key races in those states that Democrats need to defend in order to hold on to the Electoral College in 2024, Arizona, Nevada, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. And so Republicans, there's this feeling of, okay, get him now, stick the dogs on him. We need to go in for the kill. Trump needs to now finally go away. If the Republicans have any chance of rebranding, rebuilding through a DeSantis or a Youngkin, a so-called posh Trump, Nikki Haley, in order to give Biden, the Democrats, any run for their money in 2024, and then launching a strong presidential race, they can also expand their chances of congressional control. So there's a lot at stake right now. And so there's this idea that we're finally seeing justice in all of these local jurisdictions by these local prosecutors, and even in the special counsel, Jack Smith, because the American people have their back, because the American people showed up, because the American people provided the mandate that was needed to give the prosecutors a shot of courage to finally do their jobs and a sense of protection. And that included, of course, Republicans. And so it's almost like the American people had spoken, the will of the people had spoken, and Trump was just toxic. And he was just the kid that was going to get booed out of the cafeteria by everybody. But nothing's really come out of it just yet. It just turned out to be just some excitement that Trump ginned up for himself. And while the signs coming out of the Manhattan DA's office do look promising, Trump is doing his usual mafia threats and tactics like he did during his entire time in the White House when he wielded his powerful Twitter account to obstruct justice by threatening law enforcement, from Bruce Orr to Lisa Page to Peter Strzok and so on, Mueller, the long list of people he went after who were tasked with investigating Russian mafia crimes and Russian mafia corruption, and by extension, how the Russians helped bring the Trump family to power and so on. So Trump just posted on his social media page a picture of himself wielding a bat next to Alvin Bragg's head. It was a picture of Alvin Bragg's head right next to Trump wielding a bat, and the bat was positioned facing Alvin Bragg. It evokes images of Goodfellas, like any mafia movie where somebody just gets bludgeoned to death. And so who knows if Trump and his Kremlin clown car can escape accountability yet again through threats, overt, covert, through bribery. That's been the long trend, it seems, of his career of criminal corruption. But something needs to happen soon because, for the love of God, he can't go walking around free running for president, because that creates such a, as we've said many times before in the show, a crisis of confidence in our country. How do you raise children? How do you educate children? How do you teach them right from wrong? How do you develop and mentor a new generation of leaders and public servants? How do you combat that when you have so many people openly getting away with corruption and incitement to political violence, and how normalized that's all been? And that's the question we keep asking on the show. So something needs to happen. And whether people think it's fair or not, if you do not have some sort of accountability, that is naturally, understandably going to fall back on Biden and the Democrats in power, because they're seen as the adults in the room. They're seen as the more mature party, the people who are in positions of power as well, who could put on greater pressure, who could be more vocal about demanding accountability and calling out what a crisis of confidence in our political system and our justice system, and the damage it does to our very cultural fabric when violent, serial, corrupt criminals walk around free, and the poor.
I just want to add one thing.
The poor get dragged off to prison.
Seems related. There's breaking news as you were talking, which is that Trump has now confessed to his sweetheart deal with the IRS, and that they let him not pay taxes in exchange for a favor. And then he accused them of not upholding their end of the bargain anymore. I just want to say, this goes to your point of a blatant career criminal facing no accountability that the government could indeed expose and stop. Janet Yellen in the Biden administration could release Trump's taxes. The IRS could. And it's very interesting for me to see this, because I wrote all about Trump and his tax arrangement in my book, Hiding in Plain Sight, referencing documents from the Czech secret services back when, the Soviet Union existed and Czechoslovakia was a satellite state of it, in which, it was claimed that Trump had a secret deal with the U.S. government, that he would not pay taxes, and he had to follow through on a number of stipulations, have 3 children, which he did, stay married to Ivana, and run for president. It's a longer story than this, but these documents were verified as real by Luke Harding, among other journalists who went to the Czech Republic and saw them. They illuminate Trump's lifelong ties to the Kremlin, to transnational organized crime, and the fact that those 2 entities were working with factions of the U.S. government, in particular in the FBI, and then, streamlined through the IRS. And it now seems like Trump, facing no consequences for any of this, feels comfortable simply confessing it, much as he confessed to obstruction of justice twice on TV and many other times, and confessed to other crimes. And so, yeah, this is just yet another thing that now there's an opening for the government to act. There's an opening for the media to follow up. My guess is that they won't. They're just going to be like, oh my God, I can't believe he's making these wild claims. I think this is one of these occasions where Trump is simply confessing. He's saying something true. Occasionally he does that because he loves to flaunt his criminality. He needs people to know that he has gotten away with it. He needs to rub that in everyone's faces so you can kind of trust that. But anyway, go on. I just wanted to add that in since it seemed related.
Yeah, no, I think the big headline here is local elections matter. I do have cautious optimism, cautious hope in Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg. He is somebody that has a long career of going after Trump as a prosecutor, unlike his predecessor, Cy Vance Jr., that we, as we keep, we'll always repeat on the show because we were a monument to this fact. Cy Vance Jr. was investigating Ivanka and Don Jr. for fraud in relation to investor fraud in relation to the Soho Trump Hotel and let them walk when he got a campaign donation from the Trump family lawyer. And so obviously Alvin Bragg is cut from a different cloth. He came to power through the grassroots progressive engine in New York City. There's high hopes in him. And some of Cy Vance's people thought that Cy Vance was leaving him with a pretty wrapped up case with a nice, neat bow to go after Trump that Alvin Bragg was not pursuing. And what an outrage that was. One of these prosecutors even wrote a book about it. But now it looks like Alvin Bragg might be zeroing in. There might be something there in regards to the Stormy Daniels hush money case, which is a case carried out by Trump while he was president to silence a porn star, his affair. So it's all, it all applies to a corruption charge for when he was in office. It's all stemming to his own election interference and doing something illegal to try to protect himself politically and do something illegal and corrupt to stay in power.
It's so piddling, though. I mean, like, it blows my mind that this is the thing. When he has...
Right, why don't they try people for being a traitor anymore?
Yeah. When did treason, not become a prosecutable crime? He should have been indicted back in 2016, for things he had done in the election, threatening private citizens, threatening public officials, etc. I mean, then he went on to basically commit like a crime a week for the entirety of his presidency. And the fact that he had consensual sex, which is a rarity for Trump, with a porn star. Quite honestly, I think he wanted that story out because he wanted to be thought of as a man who a porn star would want to sleep with. He had 2 green card wives, Ivana and Melania, and then he had Marla Maples, who was picked by, his advisors because Trump was going to run for president again as part of a Southern strategy. Like, how does this New York pseudo tycoon win over the South? You get this Southern belle. He has had very few actual romantic relationships. He's been accused of rape by Ivana and by other women. He's been accused of sexual assault and harassment by countless women. And he was also accused of rape by a woman who said that Trump raped her when she was 13 years old, and she was forced into the Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell operation. So, Stormy Daniels is really, like, if it's true, if he paid off some hush money through Michael Cohen, it's the least of anything that he has done. And Michael Cohen, by the way, Michael Cohen was a career mobster. He was a lifelong friend of Felix Sater. There are emails, between Cohen and Sater discussing how they had met with Putin to get Trump into power in 2016. Like, those emails are publicly available documents where they just, freely confess to the fact that there is Kremlin interference in the election. And now, Michael Cohen is hailed as this like folk hero because he once testified to Congress about his role in Trump criminality. And granted, he's like the only one who did it, which is, in part how he earned that reputation. But this is someone who has many other interesting stories to tell. He could talk about the Mogilevich operation. He could talk about Sater. He could talk about those emails that I just mentioned. But instead, he's going to talk about Stormy Daniels, which is, again, an incredibly minor inconsequential thing. It's the kind of thing that everyone would like to think Trump was really about. It's burying crime with scandal. This is a scandal. He has committed incredible crimes against the American people, atrocities, and that is what he should be prosecuted for. But that is what this DOJ is ignoring.
That is a clip we should blast out there, put it on a rocket, and let it shower down in a million pieces. That just nails it. And I want to point out, Stormy Daniels claims that Trump complimented her by saying, "You remind me of my daughter Ivanka."
Yeah. I feel like that was Stormy Daniels sending a little message to the world. I mean, there's more I could say on that, but go on.
We'll save that for the bonus. But where are we?
We'll save that for when we're about to be thrown into the gulag for the upcoming graphic novel. And
by the way,
nothing left to lose. By the way, guys, something else we heard. But...
yeah, we'll do a gulag special.
Exactly.
Where we just let loose on everybody. Okay, so, and that brings us to obviously normalized corruption, normalized mass death, normalized political violence, and so on. We've had another school shooting. The number one cause of death for kids in America is gun violence. Why is that? Because the gun lobby, the NRA, has bought off the Republican Party. If you want to change things, sign up to volunteer for Moms Demand. Moms Demand. It's a national group that trains and inspires and works with you to demand sensible gun safety laws where you live. And they also help candidates, including their volunteers, run for office, because that's what we need. We need good, fact-driven, empathy-driven public servants to flush out this system and come to power. That's desperately what we need. And if you want to know how to get started on that for yourself or someone you would like to convince to run for office, go to the Gaslit Nation Action Guide at gaslitnationpod.com, and you can get started there. So what is the Republican solution for another mass shooting? Let's check in with Republican congressman for the Nashville district that just had a Christian school shot up by a former student, 6 people killed, including 3 9-year-old children. What does Republican Congressman Tim Burchett think we should do to stop this, other than send thoughts and prayers?
3 precious little kids lost their lives, and I believe 3 adults, I believe this. And the shooter, of course, lost their life too. So it's a horrible, horrible situation. And we're not going to fix it. Criminals are going to be criminals. And my daddy fought in the Second World War, fought in the Pacific, fought the Japanese. And he told me, he said, buddy, he said, if somebody wants to take you out and doesn't mind losing their life, there's not a whole heck of a lot you can do about it.
Tim Burchett's solution, he goes on to say, he homeschools his kids. Homeschooling, right? Homeschooling. That's hand in hand with Republican attacks on women's rights, including reproductive rights, where women are treated as second-class citizens, vessels for producing babies, even in cases of rape and incest. This is an aggressive, violent gateway to taking away the women's right to vote. This is just the start of it. Women are dying and losing essential healthcare services due to Republican legal warfare against women. They do not value the lives of women. And now they're going to capitalize on the gun violence epidemic they're creating by forcing women back into the home to homeschool children. Every school shooting is a success story for NRA-backed Republicans because these school shootings scare women back into the home to homeschool, to raise their children that way and give up their jobs outside the home, give up their lives outside the home. Margaret Atwood famously wrote The Handmaid's Tale based on answering a question: how do you force women back into the home? How do you do it? And she based that novel, that work of fiction, on real life facts, real life research. She pulled from extremist religious groups and their war on women and how they're trying to force women back into the home. So what do you think this gun violence epidemic fueled by the Republican Party is doing? It's part of their larger assault on women. It's part of their larger assault on normalizing mass death and mass violence so that they can justify and get away with rolling back regulations of corporations that are polluting us, that are creating these cancer clusters, and so on. It's just sickening. And I wanted to point out one thing you're going to see on social media, one thing you're going to see in the Rupert Murdoch far right press juggernaut, including the New York Post, is that the mass shooter in this case was born female. It's Audrey Elizabeth Hale. They transitioned, I believe, reportedly recently into a man. They are Aiden Hale. That is how they identified. And unfortunately, you're going to see this far right machine, you're already seeing it, capitalize on this and their larger war against trans people, trans children, LGBTQ people generally, and their Nazi goose step march to consolidate power, to consolidate their far right extremist base, and to get them all wilding out going into this election using all sorts of physical intimidation, stalking, polling places, basically unleashing a Pandora's box of political tension and political violence. They're seizing on the fact that the mass shooter happened to be trans. Again, it's our gun laws are the problem in America. The gun laws, how easy it is to get these weapons of war, and everything goes back to the Republican Party and how they are corporate lobbyists for gun manufacturers who unfortunately benefit from these extraordinary, luxurious laws that make it extremely difficult to near impossible to sue the gun manufacturers themselves for not keeping these weapons of war off of our streets. If whenever this manifesto by the trans mass shooter comes out, speak out on social media. Don't allow this, even though they're going to be doing this, don't allow this to be seized upon in the far-right extremist war against trans people, against LGBTQ people, because I'm telling you, that is the stuff of the Nazi movement, the stormtroopers that came to power through violence and intimidation in Germany. They created this political atmosphere of violence in the air, of tension, of scapegoating others. Because what it does is it forces your head to go down. It forces you to be neutral. It forces you to say, I don't want any trouble. I'm going to stick to myself. I have a family to raise. Look, they're not coming after me. It's other people who are in the crosshairs, but I've got to look out for myself and my family, and I don't want any trouble. And what happens then is neutrality takes over. This fake feeling of false comfort that if you just stay neutral, if you stay quiet, if you keep your head down, if you just let the street fighting happen elsewhere to other people, then you'll be okay. That you'll keep the temperature down. Things might be simmering, but don't get involved. Just keep to yourself. And really, neutrality is the enemy. Neutrality is the enemy. And in a time of growing fascism, everybody is forced to take a side. As Audre Lorde said, your silence will not protect you. Your silence will not protect you. Don't you think that in the years leading up to Hitler's rise to power, when all the stormtroopers, the Proud Boys of the day, the Trumpist cult of the day, the scapegoating of the day, all the violence in the street, those stormtroopers would get in a lot of these drunken bar fights. They're stalking the streets, looking for trouble. They were physically committing acts of violence and other intimidation against the Jewish population in Berlin and other cities and towns across Germany. The violence was heavy in the air, the violence and the intimidation. And what did the average German do? They kept their head down. They stayed neutral because they didn't want any trouble. And so I'm telling you, it's not just the fascists that are the enemies, it's the handmaids to the fascists, which is this pitiful idea of neutrality. You cannot be neutral when it comes to fascism. If you are quiet, if you keep your head down, if you stay on the sidelines, if you try to bow out of this fight, if you shove the work onto other people, if you expect savior syndrome, if you expect our institutions to automatically save us, if you think that there's some Batman out there that's going to make all of this go away, if you basically give away your power, you're not committing an act of neutrality, you're committing an act of being complicit to violence, being complicit to the decline of our democracy. And we're entering this slippery slope, and we're only at the beginning. I promise you when I say this. We're only at the beginning. Things can and will get much worse. But we have to refuse to be on the sidelines. We have to refuse the temptation and the seduction and the false comfort of neutrality. No one can be neutral now. So protect trans people, protect LGBTQ people, especially in the weeks ahead, as you have the Tucker Carlson Kremlin machine going to make a huge deal about this, that the mass shooter happened to be trans. There's all sorts of mass shooters out there, and they tend to largely be white, straight males who are inspired by Trump and his cult of violence. That's who the typical mass shooter tends to be in America. Okay, that's the average mass shooter, and that's who we should be paying attention to, because all the signs, all the reporting, all the investigations, including by the FBI, have pointed to a rise in white supremacist terror in America. Okay, that's what we're up against. I want to close by saying, already you're seeing the far right bots on far right troll Elon Musk's Twitter finding a connection between the trans mass shooter in Nashville and NATO support for Ukraine and the Azov battalion in Ukraine. So yes, the Kremlin with Putin, who consolidated power through his own anti-gay laws and likes to hold himself up as being the bastion of white male patriarchy, and where he has this whole coterie of advisors who all sound like Michael Flynn, saying that in America, trans people can marry animals and animals marry each other. It's just like they have these bizarre conspiracy theories that are just a fever dream of YouTube comments. So yeah, you're going to see the Kremlin come in with their disinformation machine, helped by Elon Musk, and they're going to throw gasoline on this fire. And don't allow it to get there. Don't allow it to get there. And just speak out, donate to organizations that protect LGBTQ people, that protect trans people, and stand in your truth, and just know who is really on the side of mass violence, mass death. It's the Republican Party and their gun lobbyist laws.
California. Our discussion continues, and you can get access to that by signing up on our Patreon at the Truth Teller level or higher.
We encourage you to donate to help rescue and recovery efforts in Turkey and Syria following the devastating earthquakes in early February. To help people in Turkey, visit the TPF Türkiye Earthquake Relief Fund at tpfund.org.
To help Syrians in need, donate to the White Helmets at whitehelmets.org. We also encourage you to help support Ukraine by donating to Razom for Ukraine at razomforukraine.org. In addition, we encourage you to donate to the International Rescue Committee, a humanitarian relief organization helping refugees from Ukraine, Syria, and Afghanistan. Donate at rescue.org. And if you want to help critically endangered orangutans already under pressure from the palm oil industry, donate to the Orangutan Project at theorangutanproject.org and avoid products with palm oil. Gaslit Nation is produced by Sarah Kenzier and Andrea Chalupa. If you like what we do, leave us a review on iTunes. It helps us reach more listeners. And check out our Patreon. It keeps us going.
Our production manager is Nicholas Torres, and our associate producer is Carlin Daigle. Our episodes are edited by Nicholas Torres, and our Patreon exclusive content is edited by Carlin Daigle.
Original music in Gaslit Nation is produced by David Whitehead, Martin Vissenberg, Nick Farr, Damian Arriaga, and Carlin Daigle.
Our logo design was donated to us by Hamish Smith of the New York-based firm Order. Thank you so much, Hamish.
Gaslit Nation would like to thank our supporters at the producer level on Patreon and higher. Footsie Tootsies,
Chick Quinn,
Lily Wachowski,
Sean Rubin,
Todd S. Perlstein,
Kenny Main,
John Schoenthaler,
Ellen McGirt,
Joel Farron,
Larry Gasson,
Erica Moore,
Karen A. Deal,
Nico Phillips,
Brian E. Castor,
Tatjana Birch,
Karen Heisler,
Ann Bertino,
Chris Bravo,
Stephanie Brandt, MD,
John Millett,
David East,
Ida,
Ben Wheaton,
Joseph Mara Jr.,
Julie Matthews,
Meganopolis,
Mark Merck,
Barbara Kittredge,
Matthew Womack,
Silas Frank,
Sean Berg,
Kristen Custer,
Tracy Ash,
Kai Gillis,
William Barry Reeves,
Sharon Hattrick,
Richard Smith,
Emmy,
Kevin Gannon,
Mike Christensen,
Sandra Collins,
Katie Masuris,
John Laughlin,
Emily Fenning,
James D. Leonard.
Leo Chalupa,
He's back. Couldn't stay away. Carol Golstad,
Jason Benke,
Marcus J. Trent,
Joe Darcy,
Ann Marshall,
Jeremy Lewis,
Joel Newman,
Trigve,
D.L. Singfield,
Matt Perez,
Nicole Spear,
Brian Tajuden,
Abby Road,
Jens Eilstrup Rasmussen,
Z.W.,
Kathy Kavanaugh,
Sarah Gray,
Diana Gallagher,
Jennifer Ann Luter,
John Ripley,
Ethan Mann,
Leah Campbell,
Lynn Schneider,
Jared Lombardo.
Tanya Chalupa. Thank you all for your support. We could not make Gaslit Nation without you.
Thank you.